Representative Blunt Rochester, we are thrilled to have you here as a keynote speaker for our Executive Employer Conference. You are speaking to a couple of thousand people from companies in all different kinds of industries. Some are multinationals. The people are in-house counsels, their chief human resource officers, the individuals as part of the C-suite. So this is your audience because this is all about workforce transformation, and these are the individuals that can help make that happen. So we are so really honored and blessed to have you here.
Well, Michael, I have to say how honored, blessed, and excited I am to be here and to have the conversation with you and Shannon. I think this is the number one issue of our time and of our country, and it intersects with all of the different things that are happening right now. And so to be able to speak to some incredible individuals across the country, and I would say across the world, about America's competitiveness, the quality of life that we have, and dealing with issues of equity, this is the sweet spot, and I am so excited to be here as we talk about the future of work. It's for me, it's one of the number one issues.
It's all about making sure that the 21st is the next American century.
That's right.
And you put together a Future of Work Congressional Caucus some time ago. Right. In a bipartisan way, in order to really elevate this issue and begin the conversation. Could you tell us a little bit about what your thinking was in forming the caucus and the work of the caucus today?
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I first got elected to Congress, I had never run for anything in my life. I had been in public service as you know, Secretary of Labor and head of state personnel. But when I came, I got on the Education and Labor Committee, and I was also on the Agriculture Committee because agriculture is big for Delaware. And the funny thing is, in all of the meetings that I had with individuals in the business sector, in the private sector, or even going to my newspaper, I would see the future of the newspaper up on a whiteboard. I went into a farmer's home. One of the farmers in my state, she had an iPad and she was monitoring her crops from within her kitchen. And everywhere I went, this conversation kept coming up, whether it was related to benefits and what we do and provide as a country, particularly with a gig economy growing, or whether it was related to how we operate, it kept coming up. But I'll tell you, the thing that was sort of like a turning point for me was I attended a session on autonomous trucks and buses. And I thought about the fact that as we change and shift, how are we preparing for this future? And what about those individuals who may not have had a degree, worked hard to get this great job, and now it might disappear? So it started with a focus on artificial intelligence, machine learning, looking at all of these automation and how it would affect us and ensuring that nobody got left behind. And then I realized if we're going to talk about these issues, we have to do it as a country. It can't be Democrats talk about it over here or Republicans talk about it over here. We have to have a North Star as a country and say, how do we invest? How do we lean in? How do we not be afraid? And how do we take advantage of this opportunity? And so that was the inspiration for creating our first of its kind Future of Work bipartisan caucus in the Congress.
Well, while you were doing that, we were forming the Emma Coalition, named after my granddaughter, because I, much like you, have had those same experiences and those same feelings. But sometimes I found that when you talked about it, it was like, what are they? So we decided to name our coalition after a little girl, a real person. Because if we can't come together about a little girl who is, stands for all of the children of the world, we're not going to be able to come together on anything. So for me, it's very, very personal in order to make sure that my two granddaughters have the same kind of quality of life that I've had. So Representative, recently you hosted a panel with some absolutely tremendous scholars on this issue. Could you share with our audience some of the highlights that struck you as a result of your discussions?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's be clear. I thought it was going to be artificial intelligence, technology, and things that would push the future of work, but really the pandemic pushed it. Telework, distance learning, telehealth. I talked to different people on committees that we had that shared the expansion of telehealth went from single digits, like 9% participation, to over 80% in those fields. And so really it was the pandemic that pushed it, but it also pushed some of the challenges. And so we held a panel discussion to really focus on the impact of COVID-19 and the displacement of workers. And how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that issue? And we had great representation. We had a community college on the panel. We had a Secretary of Labor from the state of Delaware on the panel. We had McKinsey represented global to talk about the work that they're doing, as well as MIT, as well as the Manufacturing Institute from Wisconsin. I think that's the actual title. And it was such a great conversation. And we weren't even sure if we'd have huge participation because there's so much going on, but we had over 80 people on this Zoom because the interest is so great, and people are starting to see their connectivity to this and why they should care about the future of work. I mean, again, it's about our competitiveness, also quality of life. And what was also exciting was that the chair of the Education and Labor Committee actually participated. And a lot of times, for those of you who know Congress, you might know that we jump on something for 5 minutes. He stayed the entire hour for the conversation and to ask questions. And as we're looking toward the future of what we're going to do, it's good to have that representation in this panel discussion as well. But we discussed a whole host of issues, everything from the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA, which many people may be familiar with, to just the fact that so many people lack tech skills. And as we're, shifting, we need to be able to make sure people are tech literate. That in our country. So there were a lot of different things that we discussed. I'd be happy to get into some more if you want, but just first of all, to know that there's this kind of broad-based interest in our country and recognition that it's not just about the tech part of it, it is about the people part of it, and the pandemic really pushed the future of work.
So speaking of Chairman Scott of the House Education and Labor Committee and Ranking Member Fox, as well as your colleagues in the Senate, Chairwoman Murray and Ranking Member Burr, are working together in a bipartisan effort. They've noticed their intentions to really all work together to make updates and improvements to our federal workforce development programs, including the reauthorization of WIOA. What reforms do you think need to be made to WIOA, as we know how important those investments are as that money is appropriated and goes out to the states for their workforce development programs? And secondly, I want to ask you, should we also be looking at expanding apprenticeships and extending those opportunities to youth and for youth apprenticeships?
What a great question. I mean, first of all, the exciting thing is, as you mentioned, they're looking at this in a bipartisan way and looking at lessons learned. So it's ironic that I started my career, one of my first jobs was a coordinator for the summer youth employment program. So it was my job to go out and make sure kids were on their jobs, and I was a college student. And I went all the way back and thought about, I've been involved in CETA, Manpower, WIN, WIOA, all of these alphabet soup of programs. And at this moment, what we need to do is take the lessons learned from all of them. I mean, there are certain things that we've learned. One of them is the role that as departments of labor, that we have dual customers. It's not just the worker, but it's the employer who is also our customer. Also, we had to learn that we should be training people for the jobs of now and the future, not the jobs of yesterday. And so one of the conversations, even on the panel, was about the fact that our workforce investment boards also need to be updated. We need to make sure that who's represented on them are the jobs that are happening now, not just because I like you and you've been on the board for 15 years, but are we targeting what works now? One of the big issues for me is short-term training opportunities so that we can rapidly train people to, get into jobs. And that's why I introduced with some partners the Jobs Act that focuses on short-term Pell Grant opportunities. What is great is the two committees have actually, and particularly on the Senate side, has just done some outreach to get stakeholder input. And this is the time, I would say to anyone who is watching this, engage, give feedback. You may have never participated in the workforce development system, and that's feedback to us. Why is that? What do you need? This is the time to make your voice known as we look at reauthorization of WIOA. I think it's a really important time, and it's a really important opportunity. And you also mentioned youth. The whole apprenticeship piece is really, really important. I got a chance a year and a half ago to go on a bipartisan CODEL trip to visit the EU members of parliament there, as well as to Germany, and got to see firsthand their apprenticeship programs and what they do and how they do it, and take back some of the lessons for us here. And one of the things that I did want to focus on, and I got an amendment to our current bill that just passed, was youth and targeting kids in Title I schools. Like, we shouldn't start at high school. We should be starting while kids are young, preparing them for the future of work and understanding what are the jobs that they can go to, what are their skills, and how do we update them. So to me, it's about rapid training. It's about on demand and making sure that we are really meeting the needs of not just the worker, but also the employer, and doing it in a partnership kind of way. So
I couldn't agree with you more. My industry, the restaurant industry, is a home of second chances.
Yes.
Many times, 1 in 4 Americans getting their first start in the restaurant industry. We like to say that we're the job that teaches you how to have a job. So I think it's also important, in addition to the youth, that we also are giving people those second chances.
Yes.
And that's incredibly important as well, to make sure that we offer those apprenticeships and that no one is left behind, that individuals from all sectors are included, and we bring them forward.
I am so glad you brought up second chances. It's kind of ironic. I was on an event yesterday about second chances. And, back when I was Secretary of Labor, we started some work on like the prison to work pipeline. And, it was a different time. The economy was different. But now, one of the things that I noticed was that one of the things that prevents people from going to work is they have a criminal record, and it's 1 in 3 Americans. Half of the parents, we don't even realize how many people are impacted, and maybe they served their time, did the right thing, and just because of a background check. So it's 9 out of 10 employers require background checks, 4 out of 5 landlords, and 3 out of 5 universities and colleges. And so I have a bill called Clean Slate, and it is actually bipartisan as well, because I was hearing that employers were having problems getting people. The system is set up that it takes so long for people to be able to go through and get their records sealed. This is an automatic sealing for, low-level, nonviolent, and so it's a win-win-win. And we've even been able to get people at very extreme ends on the think tanks to partner with us. So I call it my strange bedfellows bill, because it's how did we get those people all in one bill together? But again, it's about giving people second chances. And that helps our economy. $87 billion out of our GDP because of people not getting these second chances. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because a little plug for our Clean Slate bill. It's coming to a state near you if it hasn't already passed.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Talking about $1 billion, there's $100 billion in the president's plan that's dedicated to different aspects of the reformation of the workplace. And you hear a lot, and I think I'm a believer of this, after we go through this workforce transformation, we will have more jobs. than we have today. And hopefully the vast majority of those jobs will be more satisfying at a higher end that addresses some of the income inequality and the like. So I'm confident about that. But I also know historically that a lot of people can be displaced in that process. So there can be a lot of pain getting from here to there. So my question is, you just can't throw money at the problem. We got $100 billion. I hope we get that $100 billion. But how do we make sure that it's being used in a way that identifies what are those new skills? How do we teach more than the 3 R's, but the 3 C's of cooperation, communication, collaboration? How do we give individuals those kinds of skills so that they have this pathway? So as we go through this transformation, which is occurring in real time, as you've indicated, that people have those pathways in place so that we don't have all of that pain.
Yeah. I mean, what a great question. And there are a lot of things wrapped up in your question. I mean, first of all is investment. It amazes me, and this is one of the reasons why I feel like this has to be a bipartisan, like all hands on deck issue. We as a country, and that's public and private sector, don't invest the amount of capital in our workforce development and training systems compared to other countries that are comparable to us. And so, number one, it's an investment in us. My son was born in France. I lived for a few years in China because my late husband worked for a French electrical manufacturing company. And so I know what the rest of the world wants to do. We're up to the challenge. We know the way, we just have to have the will. And what this unfortunate pandemic has done is pushed us. The CARES Act, which was something that we came together on, it allowed my state to start a program, and it worked very closely with the restaurant industry to quickly retool and reskill people in a rapid way so that they could really support themselves and their families. And I think that's ultimately what this is about. It is about our competitiveness, it is about a quality of life for people, and it is about lifting all boats. That means we have to do it together. You know, I'm excited that we're having this conversation. And for me, I've been sort of going through 3 themes this year already. Recovery, rebuilding, and restoration. We have to recover health-wise from this pandemic and economically. And so that's what the investments have been about. But the next step is rebuilding, and rebuilding in a way that's equitable, rebuilding in a way that says, you know what are the jobs of the future? What scared people, I remember when ATMs came out. Do you remember everybody thought the tellers are gonna leave? We have more tellers than we did then, but we now have a better quality of experience with that teller because the manual things can, be automated. So we just have to be careful about how we do it to make sure there's no bias and things like that. But we can rebuild in a better way and in a stronger way. And the last piece for me is restoration. I feel that I was one of the people that was trapped up in the gallery on January 6th during that insurrection. And I don't think I ever would have imagined that happening in our country. But when I look back in the last 12, 13 months of a pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, an insurrection, I remember hearing people say we're better than that. And I was like, no, we're that. The question is, do we want to be better than that? We deserve better than that. And so to me, the reason why I also focus on the future of work is because it is for the Emmas of the world. It is saying we have common bonds. We just need to see them and work toward them and recognize each other's pain, but also recognize that when we come together, we all gain. That's why this is my charge.
You know, I'm significantly older than you, and you probably don't remember the day that Jack Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And he focused the country's attention. When I was a little boy in Long Island, the Sputnik floating around, I didn't know why it was bad, but I sure as hell knew it was bad. And when the president said, we have to do this, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, we've been looking for that spokesperson. We think that spokesperson for the reformation of our workforce is you. We believe that you have the voice, the experience, the moral authority, and the track record. Because at a time of total partisanship, you've spoken more about bipartisanship, that you've been able to do that in this crazy time that we live in. So we would urge you to give serious thought to that. Emma wants you to do that, by the way. Now, if you promise not to tell anybody, I'm going to take Emma out of school in the fall. I'm going to bring her back here, and I'd like for her to come and meet you. We'll do some photo ops. And Emma's going to ask you to be that spokesperson.
Wow.
Because we want you to be known as the person who made sure that we have a workforce so that the 21st is the next American century. If you're ready to do it, we're ready to do it with you.
Listen, I'm ready to do it, but I always feel like this. Every single one of us has a role to play. Just play your part. Do your part. That's what I'm trying to do. And I am humbled by what you've shared. I'm passionate about this issue. So, you can count on me, and I'm looking forward to meeting with Emma. Looking forward to it.
And you can count on us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for visiting with us. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation, and we look forward to continuing it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
Thank you
much
so much.
for being with us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.